Today, I thought we would do a little debate. The debate question was, if you had to pick just one, which do you think is more important, doing good deeds or refraining from bad deeds? So I got a little poll. You're going to see a pop-up on your screen. Go ahead and vote anonymously. One vote's in. Ooh, okay, 50-50. Oh, but the two of you, if you have a split vote,
I'll type mine.
oh, you'll type yours. Okay. So we're split down the middle, except, and even with Iqbal, so I guess I'll participate too. So he said doing good deeds. I was gonna say refraining from bad deeds. So we're split completely down the middle, which is really cool. Uh, so why don't we take a moment? You can share based on your view. Why do you think, if you can only pick one, is it more important to do good deeds or is it more important to refrain from bad deeds, and why? And if you can come up with examples from the Quran, that'd be great, but not necessary. All right, who wants to go first?
I will go first.
Okay.
Actually, just before the session, we were waiting for the time change today, the daylight savings. So we were 1 hour early to join the class.
Oh no.
So we spent some time. I spent some time on Chat GPT asking, what does Quran say? What does So it actually said refraining from bad deeds, and it gave a lot of examples and all that. But my instinct was doing good deeds because there are some small surahs that I have memorized and kind of look at, from time to time. And Wal Asr is one of them. And there in the opening lines, it says, all mankind is at loss, except those who have faith, and then who, Ladina amanu wa amilu salihati, which means, they do right deeds. So that was my reasoning.
All right, very cool. He even backed it up with the Quran. Oh, look at that. This is what we need, though. We need to start referring to the Quran over cultural tradition, this, that, and the other. So this is awesome. Let's get into the habit of basing our opinions on the Quran itself. All right, let's hear from someone who voted the opposite way. Who said refraining from bad deeds is more important?
I can go. Sorry, there's a crying baby too. So what do you think? Well,
Who drew that on his face, by the way?
Claude did that little
of course
thingy.
He does that with all his kids, if you guys don't know their family.
I don't actually like the question because I
Why?
think
Why? Explain.
I think they're two flips of the same coin. But well, there's two things I'm thinking of. I think I remember when I was studying for my my driver's permit, they said, what's the first thing to do if you start hydroplaning? And it's not or if you're about to get in an accident, you're about to get in an accident, what's the first thing to do? And it's not step on the brake, it's take your foot off the pedal. So it's like you got to stop something first before you start something. So that was one. But then I was also reading in the 47th surah, in Surah Muhammad, the first verse says, as for those who are bent on denying the truth and barring others from the path of God, all their good deeds will Allah let go to waste. Whereas those who have attained to faith and do righteous deeds, and have come to believe in what has been bestowed from on high on Muhammad for the truth and sustainer, Allah will efface their bad deeds and set their hearts at rest. So it's kind of, if you're doing something that is completely at odds with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you're denying what the truth is and you're actually stopping others from being able to be on the path of God, then it doesn't matter how many good deeds you do, because the intention isn't there. Versus, but the flip is also true, that you can't just not do bad deeds and say I'm good. You have to also be doing good deeds, which can kind of get rid of some of the bad deeds. So I didn't like it because I think it's both an action to stop something is an action, just like an action to do something is an action. But if I had to say one, I'm just going on that surah and my driving permit test.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point that it's kind of this chicken and egg question, right? Because it's all linked together. And if you are stopping someone else's good deeds, that in itself is a bad deed. So this is why I do like it as a discussion question, because I know that we'll get really different answers. So anybody else have a different take or one?
I'll go next.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree with you, Nadia. It just I didn't want to choose, but I went with doing good deeds, just because it was first, just because they have the word good in it, and probably for the same reason that you mentioned, the same type of reason, because you'll find both wording in the Quran about doing good deeds and also refraining from bad deeds. So I think they go hand in hand, or they should go hand in hand for a more complete way of behaving in the world. So I didn't want to have to choose one or the other.
Kristen, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah. So I liked I liked what Nadia shared about take your foot off the gas. And I think my thought process was similar, that if your life is like a sieve and you try to put good deeds in, they'll just fall through and you won't retain anything if you're continually doing harm. So this principle of do no harm, I think, is like fundamental to a life of trying to be a good Muslim first. And then once you get your basics down and you're able to kind of like just like treating all the principles of treating people with respect and doing good deeds, I think is you have to have your foundation first. Oh, and this natural inclination, like if we know that we're born with our fitra and we're inclined to do good to begin with, that at least if we can stay there or even be neutral, but to go into harmful actions, I think, that's what I definitely want to avoid.
All right, interesting point that we are all born pure. We're all born on the straight path. And so if we don't do anything at all, or if we just stay on that same path that we're born with, essentially we are just refraining from evil and we're naturally good. So that's also a really great point. Sophia, did you go?
So I thought doing good deeds was better, because if you just refrain from doing bad deeds, that doesn't mean necessarily you're doing good things. You could just be not doing bad things and just, I guess, coasting, just not doing anything good. So just because you're not doing anything bad doesn't mean you will be doing good. That makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. And isn't there a famous quote? I'm forgetting it now, but it's something about neutrality in the time of evil is actually choosing the wrong side, right? So yeah, that's what makes this question so complicated. I was really excited to hear what you guys have to say. All right, go ahead, Nadia.
So I had a question. Something Kristen said got me thinking about something I've been reading recently in the Quran, and that is the idea of fitra, that we're all born pure. And I always remember learning that is one of the hallmarks of Islam, that there's no original sin. We're all kind of born good and pure. But recently I've been reading a lot, and it might just be in the Muhammad Asad tafsir part, but Muhammad Asad keeps referencing this idea that man is this quote from the Quran, that man is created weak.
Mm-hmm.
So and in his tafsir for a lot of things, he says if that will always kind of lean into doing bad deeds because of that. So I don't know what my question is, but I just it jived a little weird to me based on what I know about being born pure and then being created weak. So I just wondered if anyone had a thought on that.
Yeah, that's a good point that you bring up about his translation. I would chalk that up to one of his personal biases, because that's also it's true. Like it is a verse in the Quran, but there's so many different ways to interpret it, and that's one of the things where he has sort of only interpreted it in one context, and he keeps referring back to it. So I would just keep in mind that there are many ways, many more ways to interpret that verse. You know, it could even be the fact that we have free will. It could be related to so many different other things. But yeah, that's definitely something to keep in mind. Yeah, Kristen?
So I don't know which specific verse you're mentioning, but I mean, when I hear that, I think of maybe forgetful or temptable.
Yeah, because why don't you think of it this way? Like a baby is born weak, but a baby's born good, right? But yeah, I agree with you on that, Nadia. That's something that also I tend to personally disagree with him on his personal interpretation.
Well, and on that idea of a baby born weak, but a baby born pure, like to become strong, it takes a muscle, and doing good deeds is kind of a muscle you have to exercise. You can't just sit back and do nothing.
Yeah. Anyone else on this topic? Originally, I was like, oh, then I'm gonna make everyone switch sides and argue for the opposite. I don't know if you guys want to do that, or we can take a post debate poll if nobody has any other points. So you guys should get the post debate question. Oh, we're still split.
We are still confused, but at a higher level.
Well, why don't we ask, has anyone switched sides?
Good
and why?
question. Yeah, did anyone switch sides? Good question.
I will just want to share that when I was doing the ChatGPT research, it said, it was quoting verses, but it said there's a distinction between major sins and minor sins. And you should avoid major sins because they nullify your good deeds. So anyway, just FYI.
What do you think here?
Well, I will just keep the same.
You're gonna keep the same?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I'm also laughing because you keep bringing up GPT, which I'm like the anti-AI crusader over here. I think it's the devil. Um,
Well, so when I ask the
yeah.
question, I always ask it to give references so that I can independently verify. But I didn't verify in this case, but
It wouldn't answer right away.
yeah, it also said,
Is-
yeah, it took 3 tries to say, kind of force it to say which one. You can choose only one.
You know, I was thinking because good deeds are 10 times, you get 10 times a blessing for that it would be better to do good deeds.
Ismail was here. I asked him that question, and he said, doing good deeds because you won't have time for bad deeds.
Oh, dude, see that kid logic? Like, that's what I mean about like, you never know who has some golden nugget of wisdom. That's awesome. Yeah, and has anyone changed their opinion from an earlier time in life to now? Did anyone have a different opinion before and you changed your opinion?
Well, I'm still of the opinion that the discussion is good, but the question is flawed.
All right. That's great. Yeah, so I think when I was younger, I used to think, oh, doing good deeds is better because it's just I guess I just have fun with these questions in my mind. I'm so happy I have other people to talk about it now. But then I would say like maybe for about a decade or so, I was like, oh, definitely refraining from bad deeds is more important. And then I finally realized, at least for myself, more recently, I think in the past couple years, I think what's important is that we're tied. So I think that any healthy, good society or group should have a tie of half of the group should think that good deeds or should be more focused on doing good deeds, and half of the group should be more focused on refraining from bad deeds. And in that way, we have a balanced society. So that's why I was so happy when we were tied. I think that's exactly what we need because right where we focus is where we're gonna see the things that need resolution and where we put our energy and time and effort. So I'm happy to see that we are split down the middle. All right, Kristen?
Yeah, another point that I wanted to discuss maybe is, you know how there are some things, some actions that you do that basically harm yourself, and then there are some actions that have an impact, a negative impact on others. And so I think that's also a key differentiator is if I do something and it just harms me, it still can have a ripple effect, because we're interconnected beings. I don't live on an island isolated, but I think it's especially critical to consider if your action is going to harm someone else and you do it anyway. Not only do you, seek forgiveness from Allah, but then there's another person that you need to repair with. So
You know what's interesting about that is that that verse that I quoted earlier says, like, if I don't have it in front of me anymore, but it said if you block other people from the path of Allah, then that no good deeds are worth anything. So it is that idea of how it affects others. And I know there's a psychological study that we use a lot in education that talks about if you say something positive to someone, it has an effect, but if you say something negative to someone, it has 5 times the effect. And so if you do say something negative, it's going to take 5 positives to make up that impact that negative piece has. So
We got Zan. It looks like you're in Minnesota, not in Pakistan. Did you come back to vote?
Assalamualaikum.
Assalamualaikum. So we were just about to finish up the debate on which is better. If you had to pick one, which would you say is more important, doing good deeds or refraining from bad deeds? And we were tied. So do you have an opinion either way you want to share?
I guess good deeds, honestly, I could go either way.
Oh, come on. You have to pick one. If you had to pick one. Doing good deeds?
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
Okay. Nadia, why don't I read that verse that you were just talking about? So 47:1. As for those who are bent on denying the truth and on barring others from the path of God, all their good deeds will God let go to waste. So yeah, it is interesting to think about, there are some bad deeds that could wipe out all the good deeds. So it is definitely something to keep us on our toes.
there's also something interesting in that verse. And I don't know the Arabic part of it, but in the English it says those who are bent on, what did you say? Bent on something?
Denying the truth.
Denying the truth. And so when you say someone's bent on it means they're doing it constantly, again and again. It's not like a one-time denial of the truth. And if you're barring someone, that is an action that happens kind of in time, again and again and again. So it's not like one bad deed versus one good deed. How is it? But the bad deeds that is being described is something that is ongoing.
Yeah. To that point, why don't I read another translation too? So Dr. Lale Bakhtiar says, so she usually translates disbelief as ingratitude. So she says, those who were ungrateful and who barred from the way of God, God caused their actions to go astray. And I'll do, how about Yusuf Ali? Those who reject God and hinder others from the path of God, their deeds will God render astray from their mark. Okay, anything
Can I
else?
offer one more thing on
Yeah, please.
Bakhtiar translation? So
Yeah.
can you read that one again? Sorry.
Sure, yeah. Muhammad Assad says, as for those who are bent on denying the truth and on barring others from the path of God, all their good deeds will God let go to waste. And then Dr. Lale Bakhtiar says, those who were ungrateful and who barred from the way of God, God caused their actions to go astray.
So causing the actions to go astray. So I always thought of it like you're doing all these good things and you do one bad thing and all these good things are gone, but it sounds more like it's that these good deeds you're doing actually are these good things themselves are kind of going off the wrong direction because your intention behind those good, it's not an actual good deed, I guess is the idea, because of the intention behind it. So it's not two separate things.
Yeah, actually, why don't we go a little further into that? So one of the follow-up questions in our curriculum was talking about how do we use this concept of looking at good deeds versus bad deeds in the secular world, or in just modern day life, and like the way that corporate morality sometimes functions. And I gave the example of the concept of carbon offsetting. So this is where a company will say, okay, don't get mad at us for doing all of these terrible things to the environment because we're offsetting our essential bad deeds. We are, replanting trees that are going to make up for the destruction or the bad deeds that we've caused. We're doing good deeds to make up for it. So I had some follow-up questions just asking about, that sort of moral logic versus how God instructs us to view good versus bad deeds, and the sort of bad deeds that take away people's capacity to do good. Where you're going with that, Nadia, is really relevant today. Anything else on this topic before we go to the next question?
Well, as I read that the verse that Nadia quoted, and there's further explanation in this version of the translation, Assad's version, Muhammad Assad's version. I think it kind of I think it is talking about people who do not have faith. And because everybody is doing good, not only people of faith. So I think it is referencing that good deeds. When you don't have faith and you're doing good deeds, those will go to waste. That's my take from this. Okay.
Yeah, that's relevant too, is like these are the verses specifically for believers or people who are willing to be guided. This is a special reminder that we need to take into focus. And that's a good reminder, because how often is it that we see people who say, oh yeah, I'm a believer, and then they don't do anything to follow it up, right? Or they think that just saying is the same as living as a believer. So that's a great outlook to take as well. Okay, so the next question was just on verse 41, 44. So the Quran is described in many ways throughout the Quran. God describes it in many different beautiful ways, but in this verse in particular, God describes the Quran as a source of guidance and of healing. So I just wanted to go around and ask, what has been healed for you so far? Or what sort of guidance have you received so far from the Quran? And it'd be great to hear from a few different people, whoever wants to share. Too personal a question?
I'll go. I was waiting for other folks. Well, we could probably be here all night on this topic. I'll just say that recently I've been reading more around the verses that mention nature and the signs of Allah. And in particular, like I'm really loving, even in the the guides that you send out about like the bee, the verse of the bee, that was a really good one. And then, I mean, there's just so many that if you spend time pondering and really looking at it from different angles and having discussion, I find a lot of the verses that mention all of creation, especially, I think last week even I was sharing something about, and we have made the sky a canopy. So there's just a lot of beauty even in the language of how, creation's been described.
Yeah, it's awesome because these are all things we see in our everyday life, but do we pay attention to them? And if we do pay attention to them, do we pay attention with this framework and this frame of mind? So that's awesome to hear that it's helping you think about these everyday things in a more beautiful way.
I'll go next. I think I would lean more towards healing for me. The last few years, although I've done Ramadan and read Quran, I didn't feel the connection that I'm getting this time. And that's very healing for me, because for some years I had been struggling to feel the way that I used to feel towards being Muslim. So I have that feeling back. That's very healing for me. And I guess that brings in the gratitude. I'm grateful for that. So it's a lot of healing that's been done this past year. Just reconnecting in a way that I remember from another point of my life. And I'm just grateful to be back.
Alhamdulillah. Yeah, and the Prophet, there's so many hadiths about how faith is like a cloth that wears thin, you have to refresh it. So it's also just a natural part of the ebb and flow of life. But yeah, it's awesome to hear that just reading the Quran itself and this translation in particular, and it's helping you get that direct connection back.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say, like I was quoting Surah Al-Asr, but if you take Quran out and you think about what is success in life, it kind of goes towards wealth or education or other things. But Quran kind of lays down clear, kind of guides you and says, that's not true. Here are 4 measures of success for a person's life. And I think that kind of, gives a perspective, and it's a different perspective, how to measure success or what to work towards.
Yeah, it's when you align your life according to the priorities in the Quran, suddenly all of those priorities are attainable for anyone. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, you can be a success in this life. And unfortunately, toxic societies will tell you the opposite. So yeah, it is very healing to get that reminder of the proper priority for us in this life.
I was checking my notes. Look, I take notes of like my favorite verses, and it seems that with regards to the healing part, it seems like there's always, for any situation, there's an answer or a comment or a thought. So you can always go to read Quran and find guidance. Thank you.
Awesome.
That's comforting to know too.
Yeah, it's from our Creator who knows our minds, knows our thoughts, our hearts, and has all the answers right there for us.
For me, it's the same thing. That's the guidance and the healing. That is a lot of what I've been reading. What's been standing out to me is when God quotes the people that are giving pushback to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and all their different arguments, and then God responds to it, showing how their arguments are not actually valid. Or and so to me, one, it's guidance, because if I hear a similar argument, not about Islam necessarily, but just about anything, whether someone's trying to gaslight, whether someone's trying to play with words to make a point and try to confuse you, it's a real guidance in here how to kind of keep focus on how to respond to something like that. And that has produced more of a healing, because now I don't take as much those types of comments don't have as much power in my life, because I literally can hear God's response to someone trying to make fun of something or whatever it might be. There's a lot of applicability to those.
Yeah, people don't know there are a bunch of witty comebacks in the Quran, and God will literally say and give you the comeback. It's pretty great. Yeah, it's an experiential book, right? It's like, this is how you do it. This is how you human. That's why I do not feed it into AI. Let's not give it any more ideas. There are many different theories on how the pyramids in Giza were built, right? In Egypt. So it's been this worldwide mystery for modern civilization, quote unquote modern. When we look at the remains of the ancient pyramids, not only in Egypt, but all around the world, there are ruins of the ancient civilizations. And God talks about these ruins over and over again, and says that every single one of these ancient civilizations that went astray, they finally basically got what they had earned. And were destroyed. And in one of the verses, so I'm going to read it to you. How about I'll start in chapter 44, verse 22, and I'll go on. So, but then when they beset him, talking about Moses, with their enmity, he called out to his sustainer, "These are indeed people lost in sin." And God said, "Go thou forth with my servants by night, for you will surely be pursued, and leave the sea becalmed between you and Pharaoh's men, for verily they are a host destined to be drowned." And so they perished. And how many gardens did they leave behind, and water runnels, and fields of grain, and noble dwellings, and all that life of ease in which they used to delight. Thus it was, and then we made another people heirs to what they had left. So that last verse, chapter 44, verse 28, is talking about how Pharaoh's dwellings were inherited by another people. So yeah, I thought it would be an interesting. It depends. I don't know where people stand on this issue. I know sometimes it can be a controversial issue, but how do you think the pyramids in Giza were built? Which one of the theories that are floating out there? Obviously, none of us know. We don't know, based on what's been left behind. We're all guessing, but some people will look at the tools that are left behind and they will say that there's no way that it physically could have been possible, that they had to have had some sort of superhuman strength. The out there people will say aliens built it. Then that brings up a controversy on the other side. I've heard people be, well, that's a racist view because you're basically saying that these people weren't capable of building these incredible feats of architecture. And then there are other theories too where people say, they were actually way more advanced, and current civilization is actually a very feeble version of what the human used to be able to do. And so this verse to me provides yet another theory or another way to understand that maybe the reason why we don't know, maybe the reason why it doesn't match up, the tools that are left behind versus the buildings that were built, were because the tools that were left behind were left by a more recent civilization that inherited the older pyramids. But I kind of gave all the theories out there. I know there's so many. I was like, is anyone going to admit to believing in aliens? I don't know. But hey, it's a safe space. Whatever your theory is, what do you believe? Or are you all on the same page? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that the last one I think that you mentioned makes more sense to me. I think that we have a way of thinking that modernity is so superior to anything else, and we really don't know what people before us, or the creation before us, could not do. And I think it's in that range of possibility that it was just that they had whatever tools or knowledge to do it. Yeah.
I think just whenever a society is conquered or implodes or whatever happens, there's just a tremendous amount of lost information. And that just seems to be the common theme. And then one day we find out it was like XYZ, and that's how we did it. And it's like, oh, of course. But I think
they were more advanced than we think they were.
Right. Maybe, yeah, more in tune to their environment. So they maybe had thousands of years to develop these systems, and then something happened, and then the information is just gone. Nobody knows what happened after that. I don't know. That's what I think. Or maybe aliens. I don't know.
Oh, we have an alien believer.
Wouldn't it be something if it wasn't anything as complex as we're kind of inclined to think, that it was something so simple, and then at some point discover it and go, oh wow, that was all it took to put that together that way. It happened that way, It'd be much more simpler than we think. We just have a way of thinking that things have to be a certain way, and just are missing something. in the way we're processing it. Could be simple.
Definitely. Yeah. I whenever I hear the discussions, I'm always like, well, they're coming from a secular point of view. And a lot of times as Muslims, we face this, right? Where we know that there's a really simple solution to something, but we see out in the secular world or, corporate world, there's money to be made by overcomplicating something. And then everyone believes that things have to be complicated when, if you trust your intuition, you actually have a lot more genius within you than some of these corporations or oppressive societies might want you to believe. Anyone else have a theory they want to share? None of us knows.
I thought that I had seen a show a long time ago, and I don't remember if it was like the Discovery Channel or something, but I believe there's a theory that people were forced to build the pyramids under harsh conditions. And yeah, so I don't know if that's true or not, but
Yeah, definitely. I would say that's probably like the most mainstream view is that it seems impossible to us, but people who are maybe forced, and maybe the combination of that with, tools that are no longer in existence or there's no evidence of them, maybe it's not as complicated as we think. That actually, Iqbal, I by accident, I was watching something else and someone had pulled up, they had asked AI to come up with a video of how the pyramids were built, and it was hilarious. There was like a giant and a bunch of people like working with the giant who was picking up these big blocks.
Well, the Quran actually talks about how egoistical and prideful the Pharaoh was. So I mean, it is kind of it kind of could have been a national project for him to build some grand thing to just make himself, be the god that he was claiming to be.
All right. So next question. So throughout the Quran, we will hear verses about how God has made the ocean, everything in the heavens and the earth, even the animals, subservient to us. So what do you think this is? Do you think it's simply a reminder for us to be grateful and mindful of who is actually in power? Or could it also be one of these or something else? So could it be speaking of invisible physical laws of nature like gravity, electromagnetism, etc.? What about other types of invisible metaphysical laws that science has yet to discover? So what do you think God is talking about whenever God says that the earth and the ocean and things, animals, things in this world have been made subservient to us?
At first wondered about other ways that word might be translated. So, because subservient sounds kind of hierarchical. And so I wonder about that. I just really question that because I can see a word used like usefulness being important because that can also be used for humans, that we all should be useful, and perhaps God made all of this to serve a usefulness. And if I were to put it that way, then it's not a hierarchy as if as a human being I'm meant to rule over it in place of God. That kind of attitude, I'm not a fan of that attitude.
Yeah, as you said that, I was trying to look up the most recent mention of it. So I'll keep searching for that as you guys talk, and we'll see if there are other ways to translate that specific word. Anyone else have a reaction to that or a thought about that concept?
Yeah, I would appreciate hearing a different flavor of subservient. I wonder if I mean, I know that there are verse that mention that we're stewards. And so maybe there's something around like a vulnerability that we could actually misuse. Not that things in our environment are just resources, because they are their own communities, like the ants and the bees, and yeah, even the layers of minerals in mountains. If we destroy them, yeah, I'd like to hear if there's another word that was used instead of subservient.
I think it is in 45:13, and he has made subservient to you, in brackets, as a gift for himself, all that is in the heavens and on earth. In this, behold, there are messages indeed for people who think. And the meaning that Muhammad Asad gives is by endowing man alone among all living beings with a creative mind, and thus with the ability to make conscious use of nature that surrounds him and is within him.
So that has more to do with free will.
Yeah, it says the creative mind.
I can read Lali Bakhtiar's. So I'll start a little bit earlier. So from 45:11, she says, or she translates, "This is a guidance. Those who were ungrateful for the signs of their Lord, for them there is a punishment of painful wrath. God, it is God who caused the sea to be subservient to you, that the boats may run through it by God's command, so that you are looking for God's grace, and so that perhaps you will give thanks. And God caused to be subservient to you whatever is in the heavens and whatever is in and on the earth. All is from God. Truly in that are signs for a folk who reflect."
Well, I take it to mean that these things are so powerful, but we have the ability to harness them for our own benefit. And that ability kind of comes from God.
Yeah, so it's giving us context, right? Because we look around our world and we see lots of people who think that these things are subservient to them and completely forget God, versus if you understand that your ability to harness comes from God, it's a gift, that might change your relationship or how you treat these things. And I think it's natural, right? Like we have our words that we have a certain relationship to within the context of our own life. And then sometimes they'll be used in a way that triggers a memory or an understanding. But kind of what we're trying to do here is come into God's understanding and God, what God is communicating to us about the true nature of things. And then we can reevaluate those words that we're triggered by in our own lives and see that actually those are examples of what not to do.
So to be willing or to be of service, and I think that was mentioned before. Is it Sister Nawaria? Is that how you pronounce your name?
Naiwia.
Naiwia. Thank you. Yeah, like I think you had mentioned something about useful, not in a harsh way, but I like that about the like maybe usefulness.
I wanted to get into a little bit. I know in our orientation, it was a long time ago, I talked a little bit about the concept of abrogation in the Quran, and why this is one of the reasons why we're using Muhammad Assad's translation, is because he does not believe in that concept, and rejects it as we do as an organization. And so a little refresher on what abrogation is the belief that certain verses that were revealed later on, so the Quran was revealed in stages over the course of 23 years, and in the context of what was going on in the Prophet, peace be upon him's life. So the concept or the doctrine of abrogation is a belief in which people cannot reconcile differences and different facets of the Quran that seemingly contradict each other, and their way of resolving that sort of tension is to say that, oh well, the verses that came later canceled out the earlier verses, and so we as an organization, and also Muhammad Assad also strongly rejects this doctrine, and this concept of saying that certain verses of the Quran don't count. And one of the examples that we focused on in a previous discussion is, for example, in the beginning, before alcohol was completely outlawed, first there were verses that said, "Do not come to the prayer drunk." And then in a later stage, after people had started to be weaned off of alcohol and drugs and intoxicants, finally there was a verse that outright said, "Do not drink." And so someone who believes in the doctrine of abrogation would say, oh, well, these verses conflict with each other. And so one is right and one is wrong. One is outdated. It needs to be canceled or thrown away. But this is actually a very damaging ideology in which people can pick and choose which verses they want of the Quran, and it also has other problems too, in which we don't then get the full meaning that from verses. And one of those examples I gave was like, oh, if I as a type 1 diabetic am looking at that verse, "Do not come to the prayer drunk," then I have a way to still make that relevant in my life to know, if my sugar is low or high, I shouldn't pray at that time. I should wait until I can correct my sugar. And then with full clarity of mind, then I'll come to prayer. Okay, so with that little refresher on what abrogation is, I wanted to get into a really good example of verses that have been cherry picked and taken out of context, in terms of war and violence and forgiveness and peace. So why don't we go through it? So these verses start in chapter 42, verse 36. And I'm going to see if I can just share my screen with you guys. As I read these verses, let's think about that concept of abrogation and how these verses could seemingly contradict each other, or if we have a holistic point of view that accepts all of them, it gives us a very nuanced understanding. So this starts chapter 42, verse 36. And remember that whatever you are given now is but for the passing enjoyment of life in this world, whereas that which is with God is far better and more enduring. It shall be given to all who attain to faith and in their sustainer place their trust, and who shun the more heinous sins and abominations, and who, whenever they are moved to anger, readily forgive, and who respond to the call of their sustainer and are constant in prayer, and whose rule in all matters of common concern is consultation among themselves, and who spend on others out of what we provide for them as sustenance, and who, whenever tyranny afflicts them, defend themselves. But remember that an attempt at requiting evil may too become an evil. Hence, whoever pardons their foe and makes peace, their reward rests with God, for verily God does not love evildoers. Yet indeed, as for any who defend themselves after having been wronged, no blame whatever attaches to them. Blame attaches but to those who oppress other people and behave outrageously on earth, offending against all right. For them there is grievous suffering in store. I wanted to bring up those verses because it's so easy looking at that back and forth. It's so easy to pull one of those verses out of context and say, hey, this is what God says. After going through that and sort of tracing that back and forth, why do you think it is written in this way? Why do you think this set of verses are written in this back and forth, pendulum-like manner? Why didn't God just say the message in one simple sentence? How do these verses map onto the emotional experience of being a human? And what happens when these types of complex decisions are simplified, automated, and dislocated from conscious human hearts? And let me know if you guys want me to repeat the verses too.
Yes, repeat them.
Sure. Okay. And remember that whatever you are given now is but for the passing enjoyment of life in this world, whereas that which is with God is far better and more enduring. It shall be given to all who attain to faith and in their sustainer place their trust, and who shun the more heinous sins and abominations, and who, whenever they are moved to anger, readily forgive. So we have this call to forgiveness, and who respond to the call of their sustainer and are constant in prayer, and whose rule in all manners of common concern is consultation among themselves, and who spend on others out of what we have provided for them as sustenance, and who, whenever tyranny afflicts them, defend themselves. So now we have the opposite, defend yourself. But remember that an attempt at requiting evil may too become an evil. Hence, whoever pardons their foe and makes peace, their reward rests with God, for verily God does not love evildoers. So back on the other side, forgive again. Yet, indeed, as for any who defend themselves after having been wronged, no blame whatever attaches to them. Blame attaches but to those who oppress other people and behave outrageously on earth, offending against all right. For them, there is grievous suffering in store. So back on the other side, self-defense. Why do you think this set of verses are written in this back and forth, pendulum-like manner? Why didn't God just say the message in one simple sentence? And you can answer any of these questions or all of them. How do these verses map onto the emotional experience of being a human? And what happens when these types of complex decisions are simplified, automated, and dislocated from conscious human hearts that feel emotions?
I have kind of quick thoughts on that. So I think there are two ideas. One is what is permitted, and second is what is best. So I think it is being conveyed that, it is permitted that if somebody oppresses you, that you kind of rise up. But it also kind of said that is, you kind of have to be proportional and not be unjust yourself. And there's a risk of that happening. And it is better to forgive. And then, your reward rests with God. I think those are different ideas that need to be communicated in these verses. And if we take only one of those ideas and use it as justification of an action, then we get into trouble.
Yeah, there's in the Quran, it seem to be presented with a range, a very wide range that's open to interpretation. And the more narrow the ideas get or thoughts get, that we need that range. Yeah, otherwise, you get into trouble.
I think as far as the human experience, mapping it, I think it can be a swirl. If you experience being oppressed or if harm comes to you, the initial reaction may be anger, and then perhaps seeking consultation that was mentioned. And then you might talk yourself into forgiving, and be calm and patient. And then you might have a moment where you're like offended again and thinking I should seek revenge because I have the right to, right this wrong. So I think there's a swirl that can happen, and then, but also heeding the warning that you do not want to transgress the boundaries, go beyond. Yeah. So that's, I think it can be a swirl.
But I like both responses. I think it just it's kind of genius the way it's showing a spectrum of things that can happen, emotional things that can happen when a person find themselves in a particular situation like this, and a sense that no one size fit all, and that ideal of these are the things that's permitted and these are the things that's best in that spectrum. I think it's all kind of in there. That's why I would kind of combine both responses for me. It just seems to be a spectrum presented here and what's permitted and best throughout the spectrum.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, you know how they say when you're grieving something, you go through these stages of grief. And then more recently, they say you don't just go through 5 stages linearly. It's more like you're going like through this, and now you're going back over here, and now you're going, and that is how human psyche and human emotion and how we are as humans. And so I agree, this is a beautiful way to kind of express that process that it is when you start with this concept of being grateful and attaining to faith. This is what you're doing, and now something happens to you, and you're working on forgiveness, and you're again doing all these things. You're constant in prayer and all of that, and now tyranny happens. So what do you do? What do you do there? So it's kind of the human journey through the emotions, but also kind of the journey of civilization through time. So that's neat.
There's also the framing, and I don't know if you would read the first and the last, but in the beginning there was a framing, and then at the end it's like basically in the end, even if you doubt, or you don't seek justice, there will be a severe reckoning.
And how does
like the
that framing
bookends
help you, or how does that framing help you understand the verse?
So that it's framing in the Islamic worldview that this life on earth is just part of life, and whatever we lose here, we're promised in the next life.
Yeah. Helping us understand conflict in this greater perspective helps give us a more balanced way to navigate it in this world, right?
I've
Yeah.
2 things that made me think of as we were doing that last reading is, one is I think it's a good example for us, for anybody who is and whenever we're talking to people or coaching them or mentoring them or working with with kids, whatever it might be, that it's not just you have to get this person from point A to point B. There is no point A and point B. It's more like help them through. Now they're at this point, now point out this. Now they're at this point, now point out this. And it's this evolving process. And it also made me think of in the way they teach people to write in America is you have your topic sentence, you have 3 examples, and you have conclusion, and it's just straightforward. Whereas that's and we because those of us who are born and raised in America, that's what we're taught to say is the right way to think and the right way to get your point across. But that's not the only way people are taught to think and write. So in Latin America, for example, you are taught to kind of meander around the point and bring in examples that show this and then get to that point eventually, but it's not right in that first paragraph. And that is the correct way. So if you were to write a 5-paragraph essay, American style, in a Latin American school, you would be graded down, just as the opposite is true. So that just got me thinking that I think the beauty of the Quran is that sometimes it gets right to the point, and it's like, look, this is what it is, and here are some examples that show that. It has that 5-paragraph essay style, and other times it has this meandering style. And to me, that's just an example of how it's for all cultures, all time, because it appeals to both those different, or many different, not just 2, but many different ways of thinking.
If I can add, if you are in the moment and somebody has done you wrong, I think your thought will also kind of jump from one to the other. Should I let it go? Should I get my revenge? So I think as your thought goes from one to the other, the Quran can be a resource to kind of guide you. Well, if you're going to get revenge, make sure it's proportional. Don't just let the hate consume you and you become the aggressor, next. And then, when you calm down, maybe it kind of guides you. Well, revenge is okay, allowed, but if you forgive, then maybe it's better, because revenge is a temporary pleasure that you will get in this world. But if you forgive, you will get something much better in the hereafter.
Yeah. And actually, one of the first things that you said made me think of because I think originally you were talking about how it's giving us the parameters of what is allowed and then our goal of what we should aim for, right? And there's this book. I did put it in the curriculum as just like one of those references that if you have time to read, it's a great book to read. But it's called Nonviolent Communication. And I believe the author's name is Marshall
Rosenberg.
Rosenberg, yes. Yeah, so his this is an author who has had a lot of experience essentially fostering peace between rival gangs, between warring, people, even helping children. And he's come up with this methodology of how to resolve conflict. And the very first thing that you do is you essentially acknowledge each other's feelings. So a lot of times, and there are 4 steps. So you acknowledge the feelings, the other person's feelings, and name them. You also talk about your own feelings. You give an objective observation of the events that have passed, and then you make a request of your needs. And I have actually had a lot of experience working with children and essentially using this technique on them. And usually I don't have to go past the first step. I'll just name their feeling. Oh, are you sad? Are you angry? And that acknowledgement immediately simmers down the whole conflict. So even that, right? God is acknowledging our feelings and helping us calm down. And having that acknowledgement sometimes is enough to then get to the next step of being able to communicate and negotiate peace. And inshallah, we can get there if more people read the Quran. Okay, so I want to end with this last question. So in chapter 50, verse 35, God promises the believers who live their lives with repentant hearts, and there's a whole list of other things too, a peaceful day of eternity in which they will be granted everything they desire, plus even more. So when you pray, do you only ask God for what you can imagine with your limited senses? Or do you go above and beyond, trusting that God knows what is best for you and what is possible, and can bless you in even greater ways than you can ever imagine? Essentially, how do you pray? Do you limit yourself to what you are told is possible, what you see in this life? Or do you go above and beyond, knowing that God has promised us everything we desire, plus more that we can't even imagine? And we're gonna make dua in just a second. We'll go around and take turns. Does anyone want to share their dua process, or even the evolution? Maybe is there a way you used to pray in a way that the Quran is changing how you pray now?
Yeah, I think it's definitely an evolution. I used to make dua or pray just when in a much more limited way than I do now. I do see and recognize that in the Quran that God is a God of abundance. So why should my prayer be limited? So I do in that way now.
Well, in my prayer, I don't pray, what I don't ask explicitly what I want in paradise, but I do ask for forgiveness of my sins. But most of the prayer is about like worldly benefits right now for my parents and my own work. But the one way it has evolved is earlier on in life, I was very specific, and now and some of those things did happen and they were actually not right for me. So I feel I should be just more careful, and I just pray do what is good for me. I'm more like that now. And also I was listening to somebody and they were saying, God has endless means of giving what you want. So don't restrict yourself, say, let me pass this exam so I can become a doctor. He can make you a doctor a different way too.
Or be a good doctor. Because sometimes the system will spit you out as a not so great one, right? Awesome. Anyone else want to share their how they pray or any evolution in their prayer?
I think my prayer would be more general. I think kind of going off of what he has said, just maybe just saying thanks or being grateful, and yeah, just kind of leaving it up to God. So it's not asking for certain things, and that's it, and that's all you ever do is just ask, but just not ask and just be grateful.
I don't think I tend to ask for things specifically, but just to show gratitude and contentment. But one thing I'll say that feels really great at the ending of sessions now, this is something that I've been doing for the last couple years. When I gather with people, I've started to read the Dua of Light, Dua Nur, and I get a sense from people that it's really calming and they feel supported by having someone recite dua. And I've had that happen when I had a close friend pass away, and I felt really overwhelmed, and someone that didn't even know me and didn't know my friend read dua, and it was like I just appreciated it so much.
Yeah, I think with myself, I used to only pray for the hereafter, and I wouldn't pray for this world. And then I actually read this book that I think it was Yasser Qadhi, I can't remember. Oh yeah, I think it was Dua, Weapon of the Believer. And so he was bringing up how when you neglect to pray for this world, it's actually a way of being ungrateful for what you already have. So when you pray for this world, it is a way of reminding you that everything you already do have is a blessing. So like, even the chair you're sitting on, the ability to see, and the act of praying for this world raises your consciousness of all of the things you are enjoying, all of the worldly blessings you are enjoying. So then I corrected my prayer practice, and I'll read, I've cited a couple times in our curriculum. This is Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him's favorite prayer. And it is chapter 2, verse 201. O our sustainer, grant us the good in this world and good in the life to come, and keep us safe from suffering through the fire. The Prophet himself prayed for all of it. And yeah, if you want to look at the ratio, it's 1 to 2, and a prayer of blessings for both this world and the next, and protection. So I thought we could end today by each going around, taking a turn, and just saying a dua in English from the heart, and we can all just say Ameen afterwards. And in this way, we practice asking God, and asking God abundantly, right? Remembering there are no limitations on what God can bring into this world and also into the next. And the practice of asking is actually an act of worship itself. So you're actually earning good deeds by asking and reinforcing the proper relationship between giver and receiver, reminding yourself that you are someone who is dependent upon God. So in this way, we can all practice together. So we'll just go around and just from the heart, informally. It doesn't have to be, anything, fancy. But why don't we all, when we say Ameen to each other's prayers, there's higher acceptance of it, and it's more powerful. So why don't we all do that? Anyone want to go first?
I'll go. Okay. Allah, please protect us. Please give us light. Oh Allah, please make us example for the rest of the Ummah. Oh Allah, bless our Ummah and bless our world. Amen.
Amen.
I'll go. All people in this gathering are trying to kind of seek the right knowledge. Please give us the right knowledge, and please protect us. Amen.
Allah, please give us good in this world, give us good in the hereafter, save us from the punishment of the hellfire. Oh Allah, please let us use what's in the Quran to further ourselves now and further ourselves in the hereafter as well. Amen.
Amen.
Oh Allah, thank you for helping us gather together this evening, reading your holy book, a mercy and a healing. We pray for our brothers and sisters around the world who may not be feeling safe, who may be feeling hungry. Please help us to do good deeds, to stay away from harmful actions. Bless our parents and bless all that gather to read the Quran. Let us benefit from it and forgive us from our shortcomings. Amen.
Amen.
Allah, please watch over us. Keep us safe in these trying times, and for events that try to keep us apart as people. That I hope that we can see past our differences. Amin.
Amen.
Ya Allah, thank you for bringing us together, and for guiding us to the Quran and to your words. Allow us to hear your message, to feel its impact in our lives, and allow us to be beacons of peace, both within ourselves and amongst others in this world. And Ya Allah, please grant us the best in this world, the best in the world to come, and protect us all from the punishment in this world and in the next. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Thank you guys. We got 1 month left. Crazy. You guys are troopers. So pat yourselves on the back. Every single word that you read is a blessing, and it's more than you read yesterday. So please keep that attitude as you continue, and let the Quran blossom in your heart, in your life, and inshallah, we'll finish this year out, and then we'll see what's in store for next year. All right, take care. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.